1977 was just as special a year to me in music as 1967 was. And it was that junction between jazz fusion, funk soul, and disco music. And, you know, it was a much more controversial era than the 60s, which is generally looked at with a great deal of fondness or thoughtful nostalgia, at any rate. But with the late 70s, there's still some very highly polarized opinions. But I wanted to focus today on the R&B, jazz, funk, soul, disco side of it. And there are going to be some major albums in here, of course, some that I've done individual album reviews on already, and others that, you know, I've actually featured in videos before, and some that I haven't. But this is primarily what I have for my collection of vinyl in that context from the year 1977. And we're going to start out with what I feel is a big one. The Brothers Johnson, Right on Time. This is their second album. Basically, that four-headed funk hydra that Quincy Jones produced with them, starting with their debut from the year before. But we are here to talk about this. And there's the back cover of that album. This, of course, has their cover of Shuggie Otis's Strawberry Letter 23 on it. I like how on the back they have all the Quincy Jones albums from that period, even the Brothers Johnson first one. And, you know, I have almost all of these albums now, save for that one. Reminder to myself in the future. And the great thing about this album is, it came from my boyfriend Scott. He had a double of this one. It comes with that lyric booklet. There's George Johnson and his brother Louis behind him taking a picture. I love the photograph of the brothers. This is such a great lyric booklet. And there's the Brothers Johnson Band. There's some great performance footage of them. And there's the blue and red booklet. I don't know why the CD edition of this didn't come with that. That's just a great addition to the album, having that lyric booklet. You've already seen this album before. The Emotions, Rejoice. This album is primarily an album of ballads, but it has two whopping up-tempo songs. It begins with Best of My Love and ends with perhaps a song I think of as even better, Rejoice. This past summer, I had that song on my bike while I was riding around town. It just really lifts you up, no matter who you are. Do You Want to Get Funky With Me, Peter Brown. This album is done by a multi-instrumentalist, and it has some similarities, actually, to Prince's debut from a year later. Definitely that multi-instrumentalist, funk soul kind of sound. Because this is not a common label, I'm going to show this to you. It's on the Drive label. I'm pretty sure I've actually shown you this record before anyway. But I wanted to show you that label again for those who haven't seen it. And this is a gatefold. That's the inside. So with a little glare there. Aretha Franklin, Sweet Passion. This is not an album that really gets a lot of good press from her. This was produced with Lamont Dozier. And even Marvin Hamlish and Carol Bayer Sager did some things on this album. It's actually pretty good. It's at the end of her Atlantic run from the late 70s. Cirone's Paradise. I just recently got this. I got a couple of albums of his on CD called Supernature, which is kind of a classic. Now, the one thing to understand about Cirone is that while he's definitely a classic disco artist, his disco is definitely based on the funky side. That's definitely Cirone's vibe. It's on the Cotillion label, purple Cotillion label. I've shown you that a billion times before. There's Cirone. Steely Dan. I did a review of this album recently. R.I.P. Walter Becker again. I don't need to show you the label. It's in really good shape. And no collection of vinyl from this year would be right without including Jermaine. And I've already reviewed this album, so I don't need to go into it. Herbie Hancock, VSOP. Now, I have walked away from this album so many times I can't even tell you. And the important thing to know about this album, he recorded basically with what amounted to the remaining members of the Miles Davis Quintet from the 60s. And he referred to it as VSOP, as in very special one-time performance. It was intended to be a one-off, but he actually did a series of albums under that name. And when I was reading Ricky Vincent's tome on funk in the 90s, he mentioned one of them as containing nasty, nasty funk sides. And I thought, which one is that? And it turned out to be this one. Herbie kind of mixed it up with this double album. You can find it on CD sometimes, but it's much easier to find on vinyl. I just skipped over it. There's the group at that time. See Ray Parker Jr. at the bottom, next to Benny Maupin, Tony Williams, Paul Jackson, Wah Wah Watson, Eddie Henderson, Freddie Hubbard, Ron Carter, all play on this album on various cuts. And of course the funk cuts actually appear on the last side of the record. Hang Up Your Hang-Ups and Spider. I really look forward to hearing that live album. Again, I've talked to you about this before. One of my favorite albums by Sergio Mendes. You know, Michael Cimbello was a big part of this. So there's a very Stevie Wonder-like sound. Stevie even wrote some of the cuts on this album, but I've talked about that before. So I just got this one, Music for You. Music Aperitu. It's actually a Caribbean-themed album from the late blues legend Taj Mahal on Warner Brothers Records. I don't need to show you that necessarily because you all know the Warner Brothers label at the time. Odyssey, you know. One of my mom's favorite disco-era songs was on this album, Native New Yorker. Now, that was pretty big internationally, but this album did really, really well in England, and so did a lot of their albums, and I'm really happy to have one of Odyssey's records. I think there's a new label to show you. It's just an RCA record, I'm sorry. No new label, but that was a song from that. The reason I know about this album is because, of course, you know, I love some Grover Washington, but years ago I was listening to a funk-themed radio show on the local radio station from the University of Maine, the college radio, WMEB, and they were playing a cut from this album called Lock It in the Pocket, and it just really amazed me. Grover and the band Locksmith were terrific live. You've seen the Kudu label, so I don't really need to go there with that. But that's what the album is. There's an inside and there's Grover. I look forward to that. Supercharged, I think you've seen this before. Kind of a slept-on funk band. I think there's a label in there to see if I haven't showed it already. Yeah, it's the Old Virgin label from the 70s. Sun. This is another one of those 70s funk bands that kind of got a little bit slept on in its time. I think probably inappropriately from what I've heard. And I always wanted some Sun material, and I think I have this on CD with another Sun album, but I wanted to show you what makes this album so special. It's called Sun Power. It's got an orange inner sleeve, and the vinyl is transparent orange with a custom label, no less. Bob James 4. I've also shown this album before. Actually, there's the back of the Sun album first, to show you the band. This album has a cover of the song Pure Imagination from the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie from the early 70s. I have all these 3 albums on CD by Bob James. This is on the Tappan Zee label. It's Tappan Zee Columbia. I think you've already seen that label before. I don't need to show that to you. Chic. I had this album on vinyl once, lost it, gave it away, got it again recently. This is their first album. It's got Dance, 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 Everybody Dance, Strike Up the Band, which I'd already heard. But one of my favorite cuts on this is Esse Quoi C'est Chic, which is the second cut on the flip side of the album, which is a very bouncy number, sung partly in French, very classic Chic kind of cut, and Saint-Palau, which is a wonderful instrumental. You know, Chic were just kind of putting themselves together as a band, but this is really amazing stuff from the disco era. Ask Rufus, I've already showed you this, another album that I got again on vinyl. Had it on vinyl, got it on CD again, now have a copy of it on vinyl. Again, there's a poster inside, which you've seen. Natalie Cole, Thankful. I don't know if you can see it, but this cover is actually printed to look something like a canvas painting, and it has a very unusual matte finish to it. From a Capitol label. There's even a little goodie inside it. This is your personal invitation to join the Natalie Cole fan club. Complete the information below. I like that. Very handwritten. I did not even see that in there. I always like finding albums that have that kind of stuff in them. John Handy. I've always seen this album around. I was kind of attracted to the cover, but heard it was a really good album, so I decided to pick it up. It's on ABC Impulse. And last on the list is Earth, Wind & Fire's All in All. I just recently wrote about this album. This is not only one of my favorite albums from 1977, but probably one of my favorite albums of all time. This has the original poster. That's the insert. This is just amazing, amazing, amazing. I don't think I need to go into this. You know, Earth, Wind & Fire are just tremendous on this album. So, that's what I have here for my funk, soul, jazz albums from 1977. Hard to believe these albums are now 40 years old. And this collection, as far as my soul funk vinyl, is incomplete, of course, but, you know, these are some of the biggies and some of my favorites, and some of my really exciting finds. So, enjoy your music, enjoy your grooves, peace.